So again, thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here for this discussion on the smart building. And you've heard other discussions that have been going on with smart city and smart industry. And so, as I talked about with the smart industry, or excuse me, with the smart city, even within smart building, there seems to be two differing views, or two views of what a smart building could be, right? There's this traditional view focused on energy savings and operation, things like lighting and HVAC and security inside of a smart building. But then there's also this emerging view focused more on the value-added services or enhancing the occupant experience, or maybe even increasing the marketability of the building through things like indoor location, wayfinding capabilities, asset tracking, smart spaces, could be indoor E911 type capabilities as well. So as part of your introduction, what I was hoping you might be able to answer as far as an initial question is concerned is around, how is wireless technology, and obviously I'm biased towards Bluetooth, but how is wireless technology changing the discussion between this traditional view of what a smart building could be versus what this emerging new use cases of a smart building, and maybe that goes into the line of what's your vision of what a smart building actually can be in the future? Simon, you want to start?
Sure. Good morning. I'm Simon from Silver. I'm also chairing the Mesh working group at Bluetooth SIG, so kind of wearing two hats. Chuck, great point, but I would probably challenge you with my response a little, because
Okay.
I really haven't seen a wired smart building on a broadly adopted scale. I mean, how many? Today, we see very, very low penetration of smart technologies into buildings. States like New Jersey, for example, 2% of lighting systems in offices are smart controlled. 98 are not. So wireless is really enabling this trend. It's in the first place. It's really making this possible, making this happen. And the reason is simple. The reason is money. I mean, wires, first of all, it's copper, so it's expensive. Then you have to drill walls to lay them, and then you need to, they are strings attached, so people don't want that. Wireless, it's silicon, which is sand, the abundant material on Earth, and software, which can be scaled. So it's a Moore's law that really drives that underneath, and wireless is so much more economically viable for buildings, and we're not only talking about new construction, we're talking about retrofit. So how do you retrofit with wires? It's just not possible. So wireless is, first of all, making things happen. That's first and most important trend, I think, today. And then, of course, once it's there, introduced, like every wireless node is a computing node. Every wireless node is a connected node. So you may look into a smart building as a huge, dense network of wireless computing nodes all connected to each other. So then, unleash your imagination. What can this network do? It's full of sensors, it's full of connectivity, it's full of processing power. Anything can happen. So that's for starters.
Okay. Trent.
Hi, Trent Fierro with the Aruba, and we're a Hewlett-Packard enterprise company. And traditionally, we've been focused on wireless, but when we started doing location services, we quickly recognized the fact that Bluetooth would give us better accuracy, better latency. So we've now shifted so that we've got an access point that we'll sell to somebody, but it also includes a BLE radio that I can actually be used as a beacon as well. So if you're doing asset tracking, the radio is looking for the particular tag. If you're doing wayfinding, then the beacon within the AP, you can use it as an extension to your coverage model to basically say the AP is participating in triangulation, as well as we have standalone beacons. And what he was mentioning is pretty accurate as well. For Wi-Fi, the whole idea there is that you're going to get better coverage. Like, how many people have Wi-Fi on their device right now? I'm assuming all of you, right? BLE, people will still turn that off. I talk to people around here as well as in Europe and whatnot, and they'll turn BLE off. Traditionally, I don't. When you jump in your car, you're trying to listen to the radio or you're doing something with BLE, so you never turn it off. But we're finding that people will. You need a combination of Wi-Fi and BLE, I think, to have a better coverage and start doing some of the things that you're going to do within an office. If you're going to do any kind of analytics, you're going to be looking primarily for people that are using Wi-Fi. If you want better analytics, then you then move to a model where I'm going to have an application that I distribute. If people are using it, then I can get better analytics because now I'm seeing what type of device you're really on. If you opted in, I get your name, I get, you know, better information about you that I can then use to make smarter decisions.
So it's an interesting point, and one of the things I wanted to explore a little bit is I think that maybe both of you are coming from different viewpoints of how you could potentially enable a smart building set of solutions. Maybe it's just, you know, it's lighting plus other particular things. And there's this concept of using lighting as a platform. I think you look at using the Wi-Fi infrastructure as a platform. And so I wanted to get a little bit more, of an understanding from, maybe start with Simon on, can you help educate people on what do we mean by lighting as a platform for other services? And then I want to oppose that to, how does that differ from how you think about the Wi-Fi network as a platform for Bluetooth solutions in an indoor location potentially?
Sure. So with lighting, it all starts with the abundance of powered nodes we have in the ceilings, right? So the first application is, of course, to control the lighting itself. So here comes the mesh network that interconnects all those peer nodes together, and they can subscribe to information, digital information that flows across that network. So things like occupancy, things like ambient light levels, and they can react. So that's pretty obvious, and that's the absolutely first application that comes to mind when you think about smart lighting. The second, that's not entirely obvious, but it comes next in smart connected wireless systems, is product maintenance. So lights fail, and other objects fail too. So like discovering and quickly diagnosing what's happened where and fixing proactively is very important. So imagine an airport, 50,000 lights. Statistically, 10 of them fail every day. But which 10 out of 50,000? With connected mesh networked lighting infrastructure, you can detect failures before they happen. So we are bringing the concept that's been used for jet engines, for example, proactive maintenance, down to as simple objects as light sources, right? So maintenance is definitely the very low-hanging fruit that brings a lot of value. And then, of course, those lights, due to multi-service nature of Bluetooth radios, can act supporting other services. So a light can be a beacon itself, Bluetooth beacon itself. A light can scan and receive beacon messages from beacons attached to other equipment. So you can have, for example, in hospitals, you can have beacons attached to carts with medical equipment that roam around hospital rooms,
right. And
then your lighting system, that it will just tell you where this thing is. Or at an airport, a very popular problem is wheelchairs. How do you find them? How do you track them?
Right.
I mean, Bluetooth has been used for years in this application. If you imagine that above you, across the building, you have a mesh network that spans the entire area, then that network really helps locating those assets. We call that use case asset tracking. It's combined beacons and asset tracking. And now, yet another area that's a very strong trend today is sensors. So every smart light, and Bluetooth Mesh supports that entirely, every smart light is equipped with a sensor today. So that sensor, of course, it helps driving the lighting scenarios. So it helps doing things like occupancy, vacancy, daylight harvesting in lighting control. But that sensor information is also useful for analytical applications like space utilization, because like if you have dense sensor network in your ceiling, then you can see, okay, which areas of buildings are occupied, how many people are moving there, not who, but how many. So we are, of course, very careful about privacy here. It's something we need to be careful about for those technologies to be widely adopted and not scaring people too much. But it's really bringing, so I heard people from the industry saying that the value of those additional services enabled by smart lighting grid, so to speak, is 7 to 10 times more valuable than the lighting controls and energy savings themselves. Right. So you can imagine it's like huge enablement that is becoming possible by just building that infrastructure mesh in digital ceilings.
Okay. So Trent, I know that Ruba has deployed, a number of different solutions for hospitals and sports venues and retail environments and so on. So, as you think about, you're listening to the role that the lighting can play as a platform for other services. What do you see in terms of the role that the wireless network infrastructure in a building plays about enabling additional services for the customers?
So if you're going to deploy Wi-Fi and then you're going to deploy lighting, most of the people that are deploying the light bulbs now that you can buy that have an embedded beacon as well as a Wi-Fi client, that's how you're going to manage the whole infrastructure and the platform behind the lighting system itself. You're going to use Wi-Fi. So in that sense, you have to have Wi-Fi in order to get to it. If you're going to deploy a wayfinding solution that includes standalone beacons and an application, as you're walking, you have a blue dot. The whole idea then is to get information from your phone back into a cloud environment, and typically you're going to use Wi-Fi. If you rely on traditionally just cellular, and you go into a hospital, say, and you go into a basement, and you're not going to have a cellular connection, you need to get your information back into the cloud, it's going to be Wi-Fi. So they work together, just like Simon is saying. If you have Wi-Fi and BLE together, that's what you need to start looking at. And then you need to start looking at solutions that can either leverage Wi-Fi based on the fact that most of the management tools that you're going to use Wi-Fi. And then if you need to get from, let's say, location A to location B, that's when BLE becomes more important. The lighting system itself, because you can buy a $10 bulb now, you can place your BLE beacons in the bulbs. You can augment that with your access points and then augment that further with the standalone beacons to provide better coverage. If you're looking at BLE, you want coverage, especially in a wayfinding solution, of maybe 1 meter or less. But if you're not providing full coverage, you're going to get 3 meters, you're going to get 4 meters. That means if I'm looking for Simon and I'm ending up over here on the side, it doesn't really help me. So using all of this infrastructure together actually makes more sense and is the way people need to start thinking about it.
Do you have I sense that you might have a comment to make about the management of the system, and is it done through Wi-Fi, or what's the role that maybe mesh plays in these types of systems?
Yes, of course. So I'm a firm believer in hybrid approach, because there's never one size fits all, and especially when you talk about like all those applications, they generate a lot of traffic, and the further those messages go, the more bandwidth they require together. That's obvious math. So we need Wi-Fi for backhaul. We need Wi-Fi for access, and at the same time, BLE Mesh enables this last 100 feet, last 10 feet range, all meshed together. So what's also important in Bluetooth Mesh is that it's completely peer-to-peer. So it's any-to-any communication system. Mm-hmm. And it even goes further than that, because it's From a conceptual viewpoint, it's an information-centric network because we have addressable information units like occupancy in a room. So whoever is interested in occupancy in that room, which may be a light or maybe an analytical system, just subscribes to that information unit. Doesn't need to know addresses of devices, how many report, how many are combined to, So it's a next generation concept of a network. Right. That plays together very nicely in hybrid solution with Wi-Fi, where you need backhaul, you need backbone for connectivity. That's all enabled by those two wireless technologies working together.
Okay. Is there room for, so when you think about a smart building, and I've talked about the different connectivity models from point to broadcast to mesh. Do you see all three of those connectivity models being required for different solutions that go into the smart building? Is there any one that just basically doesn't stand out versus the others?
Well, so mesh is, of course, the first one that's needed, and really the reason why other than Bluetooth wireless low power technologies existed, it was because Bluetooth didn't handle mesh. Now it does. So like mesh is definitely required in all those smart building situations. But having said that, you have many other applications like beacons, which are point to multi-point, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a different topology. And like the beauty of Bluetooth is that it's a multi-service radio. It can do many things at the same time. So the same Bluetooth chip can receive beacons, can control a light, or can be a beacon itself, all at the same time. It's the multi-service nature of this technology that really makes it the obvious choice for anything smart today.
Okay.
Yeah, he's got a point. It's going to be a mixture of different ways in which you implement the BLE beacons and obviously a mesh as well. And then the idea is that if you're doing wayfinding, the beacon acts differently. If you're using asset tracking, the tag acts a little bit differently. And then if you're going to do something like where you walk into a conference room and you put your phone on the table and you can book the conference room immediately, that's a beacon that's actually acting again as a different form, in a different form factor. So you have to determine what you want to do, and then that'll guide you on what type of technology you end up using.
So as we close up on this one, I just wanted to ask a question about influencers. The smart building seems to have a number of different use cases and differing use cases, from lighting to HVAC to enhanced services like smart spaces, which you just mentioned, in the meeting rooms and so on. So when you think about technology decisions and these sort of services deployment decisions, who are some of the key influencers that we need to be addressing with our solutions or with our information about how to get into a smart building or how to deploy inside of a smart building?
Yeah, so energy efficiency is definitely the key driver today. LEDification, it's replacing CFLs and halogens with LEDs. It's an obvious trend. The thing is that you can't do that today because the building codes require you, if you install an LED light source, it has to have controls built in. So this is a very, very strong trend because people want to save energy. Mm-hmm. I mean, all those projects within buildings, commercial buildings, are financed by utilities or by help with ESCOs, and the energy savings really drives the adoption of that technology. So that's the first influencing trend. And in terms of the players, it's definitely utilities and ESCOs. So ESCOs, energy services companies, they help with retrofit projects. They help with new projects that are tied together with this whole concept of energy savings and being compliant with building codes.
Okay.
So for us, it depends on what type of vertical you're walking into. If it's an enterprise, potentially you're talking to somebody at the highest level that's a employee experience director. The whole idea there is that, if I'm hiring Simon, he's going to cost me a lot of money. So I want to make sure that he's happy and he's productive. So I'm talking to somebody about how do I make him get to meetings on time? How do I help him get a conference call set up without him having to do much? So I'm spending a lot of time and effort talking to people that care about, his well-being. And then I'm looking at physical space. If you look at San Francisco, for 1 cube, it costs $15,000 a year. Typically, on average, across the US, it's about $8,000. But if you look at New York, the number jumps up to $24,000, $25,000 a year. So then you're taking a big piece of the pie, which is, your users and productivity, and you're talking a different type of people. If you're looking at a hospital, it's patient experience. And then you start looking at people that are looking at physical space, like cubicles. It's somebody in, facilities. And then you start looking again at something like lighting, which is a smaller chunk of the pie, but obviously you need to manage that as well, and it's possibly somebody else within an organization. So at 3 different levels are different types of titles that you'll be talking to.
Do you have anything you wanted to add on that one? So, well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for the discussion around the smart building. Simon, I'm going to ask you to stay because you're going to be here for the
Sure.
smart home. And then Trent, I'll ask you back up for the Q&A purpose. Thank you very much.